Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Gail Herman, and I'm part of the Emily Williston Memorial Library Storytelling and Writing Group. This particular Story Slam is sponsored by, of course, the Book Fest, which is supported by a grant from ECA Plus. And if you don't know what that is, you can read about it on a program. They are supported by a grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, which is a state agency. There.
When I was 14, my mother bought my little sister a baby doll at a tag sale. I was convinced it was possessed and would kill us while we slept. Let me explain. I grew up in a fire and brimstone religion that warned us that the devil was everywhere, waiting to tempt us into sin. When my mother left my father, she left the religion and informed us kids that she could speak to spirits. She told us she ignored her ability when she was in the religion because they believed it was the devil's work. But now that we were free, the spirits were speaking to her in droves. Naturally, I was terrified of the devil and spirit possession. Now, the house we lived in was an old house in Westfield that was converted into 5 apartments. My neighbors recounted strange happenings all the time. Rooms being rearranged in the middle of the night, lights flicking on and off, unexplained sounds and voices, that sort of thing. When my father moved out of our apartment, we too experienced strange happenings. For example, my bedroom is right off the kitchen, and oftentimes in the middle of the night, I would be woken up by the sound of banging pots and pans. I would jump out of bed only to find a pitch black kitchen with nothing out of place. I began to wonder, could this house truly be haunted? Now let's get back to this possessed doll. It was one of those baby dolls that spoke when you squeezed her. She said things like, "Feed me, change me." But you had to squeeze her belly really hard to get her to talk, which is probably why she was tossed in a tag sale. My sister loved her just the same. So now I'm 14 years old. My friend and I are babysitting my little sister, who is 6. My friend and I are watching some scary movie, something like Chucky, in the living room, and my sister is playing in her bedroom. The baby doll sits in a chair in the corner of the living room. All of a sudden I hear, "I love you." I mute the TV. "Did you hear that?" I say to my friend. She nods. Again we hear, "I love you." I start screaming. My friend is rocking back and forth on the couch. My sister walks into the living room just as I grab this baby doll, open the front door, and fling it outside. Now my sister is crying hysterically. I'm yelling over her cries, telling her to calm down, while guarding the front door, of course. All of a sudden, there's a pounding. My friend shouts in terror, "Don't answer it!" Even my little sister clings to me in terror. The pounding persists, so I inch open the door. All of a sudden, it bursts in. I'm knocked down on my butt. My grandmother walks into the kitchen, holding this baby doll by the arm, and demands we tell her what's going on. My little sister clutches her baby doll to her chest, despite my pleas that it's possessed and it's going to kill us all. My grandmother sends home my friend, and I'm in a world of trouble for terrorizing my little sister. My sister didn't speak to me for the rest of the day, but let me tell you, she never slept with that baby doll again, and I still refuse to buy toys at tag sales.
So a long time ago, just down the road at the University of Massachusetts, I dated some nearly famous men. I wanted to tell you about them. First, there was Harry. Harry was a promising physics major. We studied every night. We were getting all A's. And then the Vietnam War started to bear down on him, and he became radicalized. And he started taking LSD. He actually built the bomb that was planted at the Whitmore Administration Building in 1968. Don't tell anyone, all right? And he got me to picket back and forth. I didn't even know what I was picketing for at that time. Anyways, I had to leave him when he was voted campus freak, which means that he took a lot of drugs. So I call Harry my Timothy Leary boyfriend. And then I met Kim, and what a relief. He was gentle and kind and sensitive, and he spoke about Buddhism and nonviolence, and he became a conscientious objector. And so what happened was that he was on campus one day and gone the next. He was working in a hospital in Boston. So I actually really never saw him again. But I call him my Gandhi boyfriend. That was the beginning of my spiritual quest. And finally, I met Bob in my senior year. I was getting a little worried. All of my friends were engaged, or they were going to graduate school, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. I don't know if any of you remember that. So Bob was cool. He was different than anyone I had ever met. He hitchhiked. He was always on the road. He traveled to Greenwich Village and Provincetown, places I had only heard of. I was very sheltered. While he was out doing his thing, I was home babysitting, sewing my own clothes, going to religious services. That was my life. So he was glamorous to me, actually. He would come to my house, hand me a record album, and say, "Joanne, I stole this just for you." Yeah, and he sang to me. It really captured my heart. But actually, we had been fixed up by my Aunt Phyllis because his parents were friends with my whole family. The story is that we were wheeled together next to each other in our baby carriages. Anyways, Bob started to act strange. I told him that he needed to get a job, so he got one, and it lasted a few days, and he'd get another one, and I soon realized that it wasn't going to work out. And he actually had psychotic episodes after a while. So sadly, we split up, and I went home to live with my parents. But I call him my Jack Kerouac boyfriend. Probably you were thinking that, weren't you? As it turns out, I learned later on that all three of these men were hospitalized at the Northampton State Hospital at one time or another. So I'm glad that that period of my life is over. I don't want to recycle that one. But I'm still wondering what it takes to make a good relationship. So thank you.
Thank you. This is a story about stories and storytellers, and I suppose those existential moments that I think are somewhat common to men in their early 40s. Okay, late 40s. But lately I've been thinking about the role that stories play in my life. Now, a bit of a disclaimer. I am somewhat of an academic. I have an advanced degree in literature, and that means that I have spent years learning how to analyze stories to the point where all joy has been sucked out of them, and the only thing that's left is a dried out husk. Ironically, I went to graduate school because I liked stories. I suppose my fondness for stories can be traced back to my father, who was an enthusiastic, if not a particularly talented storyteller. His problem in telling stories is that he would get so excited in telling the stories, which were often funny, that he would be giggling at the best part, and his kids would be looking at him like, "What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're saying." The other problem was that he tended to tell stories over and over and over again. He had 6 kids, and my brothers and sisters and I actually came up with a numbering system to refer to his stories because it was easier. One of his favorite stories was number 32. That's the blue turkey story. I'll tell you that story briefly. My oldest sister had moved out of the house. She lived a couple of states away, and she was hosting her first Thanksgiving dinner. She had my uncle and aunt on their way over, and she was cooking, and she was a little bit nervous, so she called my mother a bunch of times to get some culinary advice. One of the calls was about the fact that she was worried because the turkey was blue. My mother said, "Don't worry about it. Sometimes when you get a fresh turkey, they look blue. It's okay. You can cook it. It's not going to be a problem." Now, my sister was satisfied, but my father overheard the phone call, and he had other ideas. So at dinner that night, my uncle, who happened to be a butcher, he took a bite of the turkey, and he got a funny look on his face. And my sister looked at him and said, "Oh my God, is everything okay?" He's like, "No, everything's fine, but just, this didn't happen to be a blue turkey, did it?" My sister was horrified. My father had called my uncle and put him up to that. I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but that particular sister doesn't talk to anybody else in her family right now, but, it could be worth it or not. That story has been told at every Thanksgiving for the last 30 years. My father has been dead for over 10 years. The last time he had a chance to tell the story happened to be the first time that my sister brought her then boyfriend, now husband, over. My father took a bite of turkey and he said, "This turkey's great. I guess it's not a blue turkey, huh?" His children, his children's spouses, his grandchildren all looked down at their plates, didn't want to make eye contact, didn't want to encourage him. My sister's boyfriend, who wanted to make an impression, he said, plus he was sitting too far away for my sister to kick him under the table, he said, "Okay, I'll bite. What's with the blue turkey?" So the tradition continues. When I was in graduate school, I had the opportunity to meet John Fowles, the author of The Magus and The French Lieutenant's Women and a number of other books. He came and he talked to the students, and then afterwards I got a chance to ask him a burning question that I think I kind of knew the answer to already deep down. I asked him, I said, "Can someone who is studying literature the way that we are, analyzing these stories, can those people ever become good writers of fiction, good storytellers?" And he thought about it for a second, and then he said to me, "No." My mother lives in New Jersey. She's 84 years old, and she's a lousy storyteller. The other day, I was on the phone with her, and after we got through the pleasantries of, here's how the weather's going, these are what the kids are up to, she actually said to me, "Okay, there's something I have to tell you," in a very flat voice. I said, "Okay." She said, "I was at the cardiologist the other day." Oh no, I'm thinking, I got to tell my kids their grandmother's sick. I got to be driving back and forth to New Jersey. If something happens to my mother, my father's already dead, I'm going to be an orphan. The cardiologist and I have become friends, she continued, and he recommended a book to me that he said it was the funniest book he's ever read. It's called The Confederacy of Dunces. Have you ever heard of it? Yes, Mom, I've heard of that book. It's funny. You're going to enjoy it. What is it about stories that fascinate us? And I think the answer to that is that stories are really the only way that we can bring to order the chaos that is our lives. We can't process and share the things that happen to us as they happen because things just pass on too quickly. So if you really think about it, the only thing that we have are stories. They're all secondhand stories too because there's no way to share the actual experience with anybody other than through stories. 2 years ago, my son came home. He was in 4th grade. Came home from school. He said, "Hey, Dad, how was your day?" I said, "My day was fine. How was your day?" He said, "Great." That was a little bit of a surprise. I said, why was today so special? He said, "First kiss," rather proudly. And then he proceeded to tell me the details of how they distracted the teacher and they found the blind spot by the swings. I was so proud of him, not just because I found out my son was a player, but because he recognized the value of a good story and the joy in sharing it with someone that he loves. Stories are how we engage with life, and stories are really, at the end of the day, all that we have. And if you think about it, when you die at your funeral, the stories are going to be what defines you, and that's kind of a scary thought. So, I think at the end of the day, stories are what we say to the world that says we were here and we existed. And for me, it's also a chance for me to say, screw you, John Fowles. Thank you very much.
There you go. So about 2 years ago, I lost my yellow Labrador, Amber. And Amber was 15 by the time she passed on, and we had 12 amazing years together. She was out of a kennel, came to me as a 3-year-old, very shy, and became really my shadow. I mean, we lived and worked and slept together, matter of fact. And when she died, I was really devastated because she was just such a part of my life. And I was really wanting to have another dog, but realized it's not the best time in my life. I was going through a divorce, and I felt my life was too much in an uproar that it would be smart to bring a dog into this crazy new lifestyle. So I waited. And I loved on all the puppies that came my way, and I kept looking and thinking and wondering. And I finally, about 6 months ago, I started to tell people I'm ready. If there's a dog that wants me, I'm here, I'm ready to take one in. But somehow no dog came. And so finally, about a month ago, I went online and went to one of the well-known websites to see if I can rescue a puppy. It was clear that I wanted one that, you know, was somewhere in need of a new home. And after a few days of researching, I honed in on one dog, and her face was the killer, because that face was just something I couldn't forget. It had this cocked head with the one ear going this way, the other ear going that way. But the second greatest part about her was her name. Her name was Glitter. And I thought, my God, among all the princesses and ladies and Rufuses, to name a dog Glitter is just really unique and special. So I was sold. And so the day I had really figured out this is the new dog, I showed the website to my partner, David, and I said, so what do you think about Glitter? And he's like, oh my God, she's cute, she's so awesome. What about that one? And I'm like, that's Casey. I've seen her, but what do you think about Glitter? And he's like, no, she's great, good, yeah, let's go. And the next day, me again on the website thinking, are we ready, should we do this? I'm like, so what do you think, Glitter? And he's like, yeah, which one is that? And I'm like, that's Casey. And he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, Glitter, should I call them? Yeah, I call them, okay. The third day, I'm again on the website, and I'm waiting for the people to call me back if she's still available, and David goes, which is that one? And I'm like, that's Casey? And he's like, oh, yeah. I don't know, I feel drawn to him. And I'm like, no, really? I wouldn't have realized. But all right, so the next Saturday, we realized both dogs were at the same rescue. And so the next Saturday was an adoption day, and we decided we're going there and we're checking it out. And we walked into the room, and it was a room this size. And at the door greeting us was Glitter. And Glitter was glittering. She was bouncing around and popping up and down and all over the place. And we were like, oh my God, she's so cute. Look, she's already excited to see us. And then we kneeled down and we patted her for a split second, because then the next person came in and she was like, oh my God, look at you people. Blah, 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 blah. And we're like, okay, it wasn't about us, it was about the people. And then another person came in, and we were like, wow, we can't even reach this dog. We can't even meet her. She is like so all over the place. But she was perfect, and she looked so cute, and she had the perfect name, and she was the perfect size. And so we were standing there looking at one another and like, should we maybe, we can maybe train her. And eventually I looked around and I'm like, oddly enough, none of the other adult dogs here are moving. They're all laying on their blankets. Glitter was glittering around. I'm like, all the puppies in the middle of the room, there was a big kennel-like thing with like 12 little puppies. They're all like, and Glitter was glittering around. And I finally said to David, I don't think this is our dog. I said, look at all the other ones. This one is crazy. I don't think we can handle it. We're not really dog trainers. And I said, let's look across the room. There is one, I'm like, is that Casey? And the woman's like, yeah, that's Casey over there in the corner. And I'm like, should we look at Casey? And so we walked over to Casey, and the foster people were there, and we greeted her, and we kneeled on the floor, and we patted her. And all of a sudden I realized maybe not everything that glitters is gold. And so we are petting some more, and all of a sudden Casey rolls on her back and shows us her belly. And I looked at David and I said, I think she had us at rollover. Thank you so much.
One day, me and my dad decided
I'll try it again.
One day, my dad and me decided to go across country by plane to Seattle to pick up my mom's Mazda Miata.
I don't think it was mine at the time. Can you tell me a little more about that car?
Well, it was my mom's sister. She had it for 25 years. And she wouldn't sell it to my mom because the guy was too dangerous for her. So she sold it to my dad, except my mom ended up having it.
Well, I didn't get it right away. You drove it back, didn't you? How far did you go, and exactly how long did it take?
We drove from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean in 8 days.
8 days. That sounds like an adventure. Could you tell me, what was the worst day of your 8 days?
Well, the car broke down.
The car broke down? On the highway?
Yes, on the highway, except we got it off, thankfully.
What did you do? Did you call like AAA or something?
Well, it is that. Also, we stopped into the Corn Palace parking lot, and then my shoes fell apart.
Wait, go back a minute. You stopped at the Corn Palace parking lot. Is that where your father fixed the car?
Yes.
Did he have what, spare parts in the trunk?
No, he had to go and buy them.
And what's the Corn Palace anyway? Was it a restaurant?
Kind of, but anyways, it's a palace that's made of corn, and it was taken all apart.
It was taken apart? How do you take apart a palace made of corn? Wait a minute. You mean it was a palace made of corn?
Yes.
And it was taken apart?
Yeah, all the corn was off.
Why did they take the corn off of the Corn Palace?
To rebuild it.
So what'd you do for lunch? Did you walk to lunch?
Well, my shoes fell apart.
Say that again?
Well, we would have if my shoes hadn't fallen apart.
Your shoes fell apart? Your naked toes were hanging out of your shoes and you couldn't walk to lunch. What did your father do about that?
He duct taped them together.
Who sent you on this trip? I don't think that was a very good idea. What did you do after that? Did the car get fixed?
Well, the car got fixed by my dad, and we went to lunch, and then we went to Baraboo, Wisconsin.
What's in Baraboo, Wisconsin?
Circus World.
Did you get to see the circus? Isn't that the winter home of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus?
Yeah, except we didn't get to see the circus.
Why not?
They were out.
Out? Where did they go?
They went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
All right, so was there anything good about your trip at all?
Well, yes. It is that we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio? What did you do there?
We saw Katy Perry.
You saw Katy Perry in Ohio? Really?
Well, we saw her in it.
Oh, you saw that she was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but you didn't get to go to a concert.
Nope.
Were there any other highlights or anything about this trip? Did you do anything educational? Did you do anything of value?
Well, it is that I can tell you an interesting fact.
What? Speak in the microphone.
It is that, did you know that the face of Crazy Horse is 4 times the size of the face of Mount Rushmore?
Is it really? You saw both Crazy Horse and Mount Rushmore? Without me?
Without
You. Who's on Mount Rushmore anyway?
George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, and Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay, we have our last line. A second-hand car is great for first-hand adventure.
This is my first ever story slam, and we practiced in the library, and Gail taught us how to make storyboards to go with the slam. So I have pictures to just guide my way along. So my story starts in 2007. My family moved to East Hampton, Massachusetts after living in New York. And it was a really rough start. About 10 days after we moved here, we found out that my older brother died. My brother was only 36 and I was 34. At that time in your life, you try to imagine what someone close to you, if they were to pass away, what they would be like. And I did not realize how solitary my imagination was, that it would just be me losing my brother. But everybody lost my brother. Gabe lost my brother, my children lost my brother, his wife lost her husband, his children lost their father, my parents lost their son. And all of a sudden, this change to East Hampton, which was supposed to be the happiest times of our lives, we're just overwhelmed with sadness. In trying to console my children who were missing their uncle, that was probably one of the most difficult parts of grieving. To be 34 and trying to explain to a 5-year-old why their uncle was never coming back was probably one of the most difficult things I ever had to do. And Tommy, I don't know if you remember that, but at the time, Tommy was only 5 and was very focused on his frustration with Mike for not coming back. Mike was my brother. And so I had to rely at that point on a secondhand story my mom had told me, that someone had told her when her father died. That when someone dies, you need to imagine that they're on a playground for that moment. And you know what it's like as a child, that to be on the playground, even though your parents may be calling you and telling you it's to come in, you're having so much fun in the moment that the last thing you would want to do is to turn around and go inside. So I tried to explain to Tommy that Mike in that moment was having so much fun, was so caught up in the moment that there was no way he could even be aware that we were so sad where we were. And for some reason, that analogy worked with Tommy. So I asked Tommy, so as you're thinking about Mike and you're thinking about Mike's greatest, happiest moment right now, what do you think Mike is doing? And Tommy sat back and with complete clarity and I know this is true, he said, well, Mike's riding an ostrich right now, pretty fast. So I thought about that. My brother was 6'3". So the image of Mike riding any ostrich, but riding it fast and riding it like there was no tomorrow was such a great image. And it was the first moment since living in East Hampton that we truly laughed. And I love that my laughter after Mike died came from the innocence of my 5-year-old son, who was just trying to contain what had happened in his life in a way that a 5-year-old really shouldn't have had to do at that moment. The following weeks were not only hard for our family, I mean, we didn't know anybody here yet, and I wasn't exactly easy to talk to. You know, it's not fun when someone asks, so what are you doing here? And my response would be to break down in tears. It was a very family-oriented time as we all shared our grief. And I said in the beginning, it wasn't just our grief that was really, that we were a part of, because there were so many people who lost him. One of the people who had a really hard time was my sister-in-law, who had just lost her husband. My brother died on August 14th, so within the next couple weeks, she had to go and tell her children's teachers what had happened. She had to relearn her own identity in her community as a young widow, and she had to really face that this was a long life ahead of her without my brother present. Inevitably, the first birthday party invitation came. The first birthday party invitation was for her 4-year-old daughter, Aaliyah. And if any of you have 4-year-olds, you know that at 4 years old, parents are not expected to leave the birthday party. That was another thing I did not understand was coming. But at 4 years old, the party goes on in one area, and all the parents uncomfortably stand around and hover around the party. And this is the situation that my sister-in-law found herself in just a few short weeks after Mike died. And in talking with her and preparing her to go to this party, she was just saying how she was so nervous of being stared at. She was nervous of people not wanting to talk to her. She was nervous if they were going to talk to her, but also knew that her grieving couldn't just be about her. It was also being there for her daughters. A piñata occurred at the birthday party, and all the kids gathered around to get their little collection of prizes at the end. And my sister-in-law decided that maybe this was a good time for her to just sit back and pick up all of the garbage from the piñata. As she did that, she looked down because one last toy was not picked up. And she looked in her hand, and it was a little ostrich. So thank you for hearing my story.
Hi, my name is Jean Powell Wilson, and I'd like to tell you a story about my scooter adventure from last summer. My family and I were out in Los Angeles, and we had a couple hours to spend before our red-eye flight back to the East Coast. And my kids, who are 12 and 14, decided that they wanted to ride these beach scooters. Has anyone seen those beach scooters? They look like tricycles, that's what my kids said. They're motorized. And I thought, you know, this might be a good way to end the summer. This would be our last hurrah before school started. Sure, let's go do the beach scooters. Well, I need to mention that my family loves these adventurous activities, but I don't usually participate in them. My husband likes dirt bike riding, and he's actually out dirt bike riding right now. My son usually likes ice hockey when the season is running on Saturdays. That's what he's doing. My daughter loves horseback riding, and she did that today. And here I am at a book festival, which I love. But that is what my family does. And so when they do their fun activities of skiing, of dirt bike riding, and all those fun things, I don't really participate in that. So I feel a little left out. And that's what happens because I love to read, and I'm not going to do those things. But I decided that today, on that day, I was going to ride a scooter too. I decided that I was going to change my unfun self, and I was going to be more fun, and I was going to join in their fun on that day. So I was so excited because I knew that if I could do this, this was going to be the beginning of more adventures. I was so excited about the future, but right now we were still at the scooter place, getting the rentals, and I told my husband, yes, I want to ride a scooter too. And they looked up, pleasantly surprised. Oh, you do? I go, yes, I do. I try to muster up enough enthusiasm to cover over my fear. I was excited, a little nervous, okay, a lot nervous, because I don't really like things that go fast. But I was determined to try. This was going to be fun, I told myself. So I said, okay, I was so excited. I was paying attention to the directions. Okay, right hand, no, left hand, stop. Okay, stop, go backward. Right hand, go. Throttle, okay, I can do this. Stop, go. What's so hard about that, right? So I was so excited. I decided that I just needed to get off the boardwalk and just go across the parking lot, and then we would go. I imagined myself, it was around sunset right now, and I imagined myself we would be veering on the pathway with the palm trees swinging their leaves, the beach on one side with the ocean waves against the backdrop of orange, the sun setting, and the boardwalk on the other side. This was going to be beautiful. This was definitely the LA thing to do. But the only thing I needed to do was get off the boardwalk first, just about 5 feet. So I made my way across outside the scooter store, and there was a sea of people all around me. I was laughing a little nervous, but I managed to get around. I was so happy. I got off the boardwalk just a few feet without running into anybody. And all I needed to do was make it across that parking lot, and then we would be off. Off I go into the sunset with my family on this really fun adventure. So here I go. I just needed to turn right. I was so excited. I was so excited that I didn't realize it. I needed to turn left to go around those two people that were walking towards the boardwalk. I ended up holding the handlebars so tightly that I accidentally accelerated. Accidentally. So I was going faster and faster. And the faster I went, the louder I screamed. That little nervous laugh turned into a big old scream. And I went to the right, and I realized that as I was trying to turn to the right, I wasn't turning far enough. I was actually headed right towards the people. Later, my husband told me that there was a helpful homeless man nearby shouting directions at me, how to do this scooter. But I couldn't hear him beyond my own shouting. I watched the man, and closer I saw that he was tapping. He had a walking stick. He was blind. Oh no, I knew that he was not going to know how to avoid me, but I needed to avoid him. So I turned to the right. I veered around to the right and screamed right past him. I jumped up off onto the 7-inch curb, avoided the lamppost and the parking meter, and then I stopped a few feet short of the glass window storefront. I got up and said, "That's it. I'm done." By this time, my family did stop in response to all the screaming that I was doing. My son came over with comforting words. "Mom, in a few years you're going to laugh about this." I agreed. "Let's take the bike back." He was happy to do that. For the rest of the evening, I decided that while my family went off into the sunset without me, I decided that I would do my two favorite pastimes: walking on the beach and taking pictures. Now that's more my speed. That's more my idea of fun. And I decided that from now on, I don't need to enjoy these daredevil-y adventures firsthand. I can enjoy them secondhand. Thank you.
(1968), the bathroom. I was a very adventuresome, somewhat risky adventuresome 22-year-old and found myself living on top of a 9,000-foot mountain in Swat. It was the hunting lodge of the Wali of Swat, sounding glamorous, but it was only a 4-room dirt floor shack with absolutely no modern facilities, but a spectacular view of the Hindu Kush and the Swat River Valley. I was there with my significant other of that time period and a bunch of other people who had come to this place, and it was magical. For some reason, I decided, and my significant other, Tommy, to leave this place and take a little adventure side trip to Chitral, which was the place we thought we were going to see the base of Trishmir, which is the 3rd highest mountain in the world. So, being fueled by wonderful hash and a bunch of orange sunshine tabs, we set out in my we set out in my 1960 Volkswagen bus converted camper. And we were lucky enough when we arrived into Swat, we had a connection with a person who ran a hotel in Mingora, which was the capital. And Swat and this whole area were considered tribal territories. They were sort of ruled by Pakistan, but considered independent. And they actually didn't become really officially part of Pakistan until actually 1969. So Mohammed, who ran the Palace Hotel, gave us some names of people we could visit along our trip. And most everybody that was higher up or had money were all related and higher ups in the tribal society, politicians. In fact, the place we were staying, Malanjaba, turned out to be the first and still only ski resort in Pakistan, and it got burned down by the Taliban a few years ago. That's another story. But anyway, so we got names of people we could visit along the way. There was only one road, and when we first started out, the first day out on the trip, it wasn't a bad road. It was dirt, to be expected, and it wasn't even very hilly or dangerous. But the only other traffic on this road was logging trucks that were coming down out of the mountains, and they loved playing chicken. And because there were really no other private vehicles on the road, they didn't care if they ran you off the road. So that was a little scary, but we were kind of used to it. The first place we were supposed to stay was in a tribal territory called Deer, and we had the name of this person, and because everybody knew everyone, all we had to do, the first little village, where is his house? Well, they're not really houses, they're compounds, because anybody with any money had these compounds with high brick mud walls, and inside the compound you had the women's quarter where all the younger kids stayed, the men's quarters, maybe some of the valued servants' quarters, because some of the other ones would be outside the compound. So it was getting dark when we arrived, and we knocked on these big gates, and a servant let us in, and here was this person. They'd never met us, they had no advance warning, but being the society that it was, you welcome guests, and you treat them as family. So he welcomed us, and it was just about dinner time, invited us to dinner, and after dinner, a wonderful dinner, showed us to the room where we could take our sleeping bags to sleep. And as he was leaving us, we asked, well, where's the bathroom? And he pointed over one of the areas in the compound. So we thought, well, we're all set for the evening. So he went off to bed, and we were getting ready for bed. So I was the first one. I hadn't really talked to anybody about the bathroom because the men had asked where the bathroom was. So I was the first one to go to the bathroom. And I walk in, and it's just a room with a cement floor and a very narrow little trough on one side and a spigot with a bucket, and actually in one corner was this wood-burning stove, which wasn't needed because this was summertime. But I thought, well, I've seen some weird bathrooms in that part of the world, but this was the strangest one yet. But I said, okay, so I did my business and went to bed that night, and I think my significant other and this other person did the same thing. Well, early the next morning we hear this loud rapping on the door. How could you have? How dare you? Oh, he was very, very upset. And we come, oh, what is wrong? And he said, you used my bathroom. And we're going, use the bathroom? And we were confused at first. My bathroom? What did you do to my bathroom? And suddenly, it dawned on us, this was not a bathroom. This was a bathroom. And we were just mortified. I mean, here this guy had given us dinner, a place to sleep, and he was, a friend of our friends. And he said, my servants will have to clean it up. And we go, no, we'll take care of it. So we rush in and clean it up as best we could, taking the buckets of water, trying to wash it down this trough area, and just totally mortified. And started thinking, I thought I was a know-it-all. And I guess I didn't know it all, because there is a difference between a bathroom and a bathroom.
My embarrassing confession is this. When I was growing up, I did not like my mother. I can hardly get those words out of my mouth. It was hard because I really loved my mother, and she loved me, and she was a great mom and a great person. but I didn't like her. She was difficult to like. She was anxious all the time. She was nervous. She was afraid. She was imagining that the worst would happen in every situation. Not only imagining it, but expecting it. And she got us to look at the world that way too, or tried. So eventually, when it came time for me to think about going to college, for that reason and for other reasons, including that I was the oldest of 8 and had taken care of the youngest 4 for several years, pretty much main caregiver, babysitter since 12 years old, I decided going away to college would be a really good idea. So I went as far away, well, I went far enough away that I wouldn't have to come home regularly. Then I went to graduate school in another city. I went to teach in Florida, and then I went to California to teach. I was getting farther and farther all the time. And I kept in touch with Mom. I loved Mom, just didn't like her a whole lot. So I kept in touch, and we had kind of a frequent but long-distance relationship. But eventually, I found myself, many years later, moving back to the East. Moved to New England, not Philadelphia, where my mom was living. And I came back east involved with a relationship. I got married, I had a child, I got divorced, the child went to college, time passed. My mother got older, I got older, and suddenly I had a very spacious life. No wife, no son, and the empty nest felt really good. So I started to call my mom on a regular basis, feeling like I should reconnect with her somehow. And when I started having phone calls with her, I discovered a very, very different person than the one that I had known growing up. The one that I knew growing up I call Original Mom, or Mom Classic. The one that I discovered on the phone was Secondhand Mom. And she was secondhand, like secondhand clothes. She was frayed around the edges. She had patches, literally. She had all the things that secondhand clothes and toys have, the bruises and bumps. And she was kind of a little old and worn, but she was wonderful, and I couldn't believe it. It was loving talking to her, except for the fact that she had gone from being anxious and scared and perfect and proper to being grumpy and grouchy. She had become a curmudgeon. And so it took me a while to get past that. But a friend of mine said she probably just needs to tell this to somebody. And she certainly didn't believe in therapy in her generation. So I just listened. And eventually, we were able to get past that. And I found this person who had tremendous sense of humor. Even her curmudgeoniness was funny. And we started to laugh and talk and enjoy each other. And I found this person that I really, to my shock and surprise, began to like. She went into an assisted living place when she was no longer able to live alone, and I went and visited her there. And her curmudgeoniness was in full bloom. She would walk around the assisted living with her cane, and she would point to different people and go, "Get a load of that one! Get a load of that one!" We met 2 identical twin women who were residents in this assisted living. We met them at the elevator. My mom said, "Don't talk to them." And I said, "Oh, Mom, come on." I said, "Ladies, I'm Peggy's oldest son, Kevin. Nice to meet you." And they looked like Tweedledum and Tweedledee, exactly alike. And they stood there smiling at the elevator. And Tweedledum said, "Oh, your mother is a very nice woman." And Tweedledee said, "Or at least she tries to be." Then we passed the bingo room. I said, "Mom, do you ever play bingo?" She said, "Oh my good God, why would I want to play the goddamn stupidest game I ever heard of in my life with a bunch of old ladies?" I said, "Mom, you're a lady and you're 85. She said, "I am not an old lady, and I'm not going to play bingo with old ladies." So I was like, "Okay, Mom, go. This is great." The one thing that she did hold over, though, from early in her life was a worry. She grew up Catholic and she worried about purgatory. In case you don't know, purgatory is where you go after you die if you don't go to hell. You don't go straight to heaven unless you're a saint. So my mom was worried about purgatory. She obsessed about it. So I called a friend in Italy who was a priest, and I told him the problem. I asked him to give her a call and advise her. He called her up and said, Peggy, this is Father Brian in Italy, and I have spoken to the Holy Father, the Pope, and he's guaranteed me that you will not be going to purgatory. You're going to go straight to heaven. And that just solved all her problems. She had no more worries, except that she had no more memory either. So every day she'd forgotten about Father Brian. And every day I had to remind her on the phone, Mom, Father Brian, you're not going to purgatory. So she was so pleased. I paid her a visit just before she died, and we talked about purgatory, and she didn't have to worry about it anymore. And so, as I left, she was lying back on the pillow and smiling, and I said, Mom, I hope that whatever the afterlife turns out to be, that it's beautiful for you. And she said, come here. And I leaned over and she said, I still worry about purgatory. And then I said, Mom. And she looked at me and she winked and she said, just kidding, get out of here, you dope. Thank you.
Right, those of you that heard all the stories, your favorite story. If you have two favorite stories, you may put down two people.
Have you got the cards yet? As soon as she gets the cards, I'll start my thing. Everybody get handed over their cards? More cards? Bring them over. Pass them out. You can't hear me yet? How's this? Is it beautiful? All right. I love this thing. All right. Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? It's Superman! Bum-ba-dum. Do you remember the theme? Bum-ba-dum, 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 bum-ba-dum. I loved Superman. When I was 6 years old, I knew everything there was to know about Superman. I knew how to hold out my hands for takeoff. I knew those magic words. Up, up, and away! Superman, he was smarter than any crook. He could blow asteroids off course so they wouldn't crash into the earth. He could see through buildings. But you know what the best thing was about Superman? He could fly. When I grew up, I was going to be Superman. I was going to fly. In fact, I already could. A little bit. Yeah. I was practicing. Every day, 6 o'clock, Quaker Oats started to bring me 15 minutes of Superman. I put on my blue pajamas. Then I tie my mother's red tablecloth around my neck. I'd run around the room really fast so the tablecloth would flap up behind me. Then I'd jump onto my bed and I'd start to bounce. And I'd bounce and I'd put out my hands and I would fly right across the room to my brother's bed. Oh yeah. Well, I part way. Well, I had to put down a lot of pillows on the ground. I was practicing, but I was getting better. All I needed was a real Superman suit with a real letter S in front. I had an idea. Christmas is coming. I could ask Santa Claus for it. Santa brings gifts to Jewish kids, too. He's not prejudiced. So I wrote, Dear Santa, please get me a real Superman suit with a real letter S in front. I am a good boy. I don't hit my brother much. And I signed it, Bobby Reiser. And just to make sure that my parents sent the letter, every day I would remind them. I'd say, you know, Santa's going to get me a Superman suit. And they would give that answer, you know, that parents love to give. We'll see. I hated that. It didn't mean yes, it didn't mean no, it didn't mean anything. But I knew that Santa knew how much I wanted that suit. I had my whole first trip all planned. See, we lived on the 5th floor of an apartment building looking down over Ocean Parkway. And from my window, I could see the trees and the cars. That was where I was going to start. I put on my suit. Out the window I'd go, and then down past the window of my best friend, Billy Davis. Hi, Billy. Bob, is that you? Nah, it's me. I'm Superman. Bum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum. Then down I would go, down in front of the building where all the mothers were with their baby carriages. Hi, Mrs. Danzig. Bobby, is that you? I said, nah, it's Superman. Bum-ba-dum. Then down I'd go, down Ocean Parkway. Bum-ba-dum, 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 bum-ba-dum. Over the buildings, bum-ba-dum, over the cars, over the trees. Oh, down there. Look, there's a little kid. He's getting picked on by the worst bully in the whole block. Bruce Frank. This was a job for Superman. I go down, whoomp, land right in front of him. All right, Bruce, leave the kid alone. He'd look at me. Who's going to stop me? You, Reiser? No, me, Superman. And I would blow my super breath as hard as I could. And down he would go, bang, right on his behind. Well, the little kid, he'd look up at me, he'd say, oh, gee, thanks, Superman. That's all right, little kid. Just remember, be good, eat your Quaker oats. And then I would take off, back home, bum-ba-dum, 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 bum-ba-dum. Well, about a week before Christmas, I was sitting at breakfast with my parents, and they were looking at each other. You know, like they were saying something, but they weren't really saying it, just with their faces. Finally, my father starts saying, Bobby, Santa's not giving any Superman suits this year. I couldn't believe it. Why? My mother jumped in. Well, Bobby, there was a boy. He jumped out of the window in Canarsie and he broke his leg. He was lucky it was only the 2nd floor. Yeah, but he probably didn't practice or anything. I practice. I'm going to be good. I can do it. I can do. Sorry, Bobby, no Superman suits. I'm sorry. That's what Santa says. I couldn't believe it. How could Santa be so mean? Well, Christmas morning came. We had a little one, you know. with the little bells on it and things. And all around it on the floor there were like, there was a Superman coloring book, and there was Superman crayons, there was a Superman goggles, but there was no Superman suit. I couldn't believe that Santa had been so mean. Well, a couple of years later, I realized that Santa probably saved my life. Well, actually, my parents did. By then I knew about Santa and my parents. But still I want to fly. Maybe that's why I tell stories. When I tell you a story, I can go back in time. I can go into the future. I can go anywhere in the world. I can go over oceans. I can go over mountains. But even better than Superman, I can take everybody with me. So everyone, put out your hands. And let's say those magic words. Put them out. Up. Say it. Up and away. Bum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Up and away. And we have the favorite stories of today. And interesting enough, there was a tie for one of the favorite stories. First place, I'm going to get that one, so that you know what it was. Or maybe should I go from third first? Third first, okay. Third place goes to Jean Powell Wilson. Yay! And she gets a book from a new book. Besides a secondhand book, she gets a brand new book. It's an Agatha Christie book. And no, I'm sorry, Diane Ackerman, The Zookeeper's Wife. Sorry, that's your book. Great, give her a hand. And we hope you have many secondhand adventures listening to your family's adventures. So third place, there was a tie for second place. Andrew Shelfo and Sarah Rivers. Would you please give them a hand? And the second place, we have two prizes for second place. We had two. One prize is a gift certificate to the White Square Books. The second-hand prize, because there was a tie, is this beautiful set of art note cards and a book by Agatha Christie from the White Square Bookstore in East Hampton. So it's the same bookstore, and it's called After the Funeral. So this is one prize, and this is the other. So I'm going to let them pick. Yeah, you figure it out. Give them a hand, Sarah and Andrew. And the first place goes to Tamara Smith. Her family is jumping for joy. And Tamara gets a certificate, special because it's first place, and she gets a gift certificate to the Nash Galleries. And there are some very interesting things in there. I know you'll enjoy it. So could our winners please come up here so you can have a photo op? Winners come up. Winners come up. Joe! Jean, come on up. Now we need to get some flash pictures. Who has an iPhone? Because we have to have this. So can somebody, yeah, but I want you in it. So, oh, let's give a hand for the audience. They did a wonderful job in sticking with it and doing everything. We are so happy. And here's Kathy.